I've got a very indulgent and decadent rig put together for today's video. The Tyler JTG, the Soldano X88 IR, and the Axe-Fx 3 handling post-effects duties. This video started life as a thought experiment swimming around in my brain along the lines of this. What if you had to build a late 80s style session rig with gear available in 2025? If you want to see in-depth videos with the pieces of gear that I have chosen, I'll link them at the end of today's video. And if you want access to my Fractal blocks library, I'm using effects that are matched to hardware processors like Eventides and Lexicons. A whole bunch of work went into that one, and it's designed just to be a grab-and-go resource for your Fractal devices. That will be linked in the video description. But for now, let's start off by dialing in a very lush and greasy clean sound. We're going to start with the absolute basics, the guitar going into the preamp. So I'm going to be using the neck and middle pickup on the JTG. I've got the preamp bypassed at the moment, and I've got the altered mode of the clean channel on here. This was not available on the original X88. It's a little bit fatter and grittier sounding than the normal mode on here, which I personally really like. So we'll hear that. It's going to be totally dry. It's going to be a little bit flat and uninspiring, quite frankly. Then I'll kick in the guitar's onboard preamp, which is going to act as a buffer and apply a little bit of EQ on there just to sweeten it up. So let's start there. Next, let's add 3 always-on effects from the Axe-Fx 3. I'm going to use a parametric EQ block with a low cut at 80 Hz and a high cut at 8 kHz. I'm going to add an 1176 style compressor just to sweeten things up again. And then I'm going to add the studio reverb at the stock settings for a small room style sound. The guitar preamp is still on, so let's have a listen to this one by one. Each of those elements on its own is pretty subtle, but the combination of the guitar's preamp acting as a buffer and a subtle EQ into the X88 IR, and then the post EQ, the compressor to fatten things up, and the room style reverb to just add a little bit of stereo width on there, works really well. We're not fundamentally altering the core tone just yet, but let's totally blow it to pieces now and add not only some stereo tri-chorus, but some pitch detune. I think it's the combination of chorus to add some movement and modulation, and the detune to add stereo width that really makes that late 80s clean tone so very special. So we'll hear it without the modulation effects, and then I'll bring in the chorus and then the detune. Yeah, that is the good stuff right there. The tri-chorus adds this wonderful sense of space to everything, and the Detune just pushes it and smears it even wider, adding some echo from a 2290 style delay that's panning around, and a volume pedal. I'm actually using a Fractal EV1 as an expression pedal with the Axe-Fx on here. Lets you do some really sweet volume swells as well on there, you know, this kind of thing. Try those big, stretchy Holdsworth-inspired swells as well. If I was going for a clean, funky single note thing, I'd use a heavier compressor on top of all of this. This is the VCA bus compressor on the Axe-Fx3 now. One amazing thing about the Axe-Fx3 is how detailed the reverbs can get, especially the cloud style reverb. So I'll do some more swells with a 20-second Stratocumulus reverb. Let's hear some dirty sounds now. I love the crunch mode on the X88 IR, especially with the fat switch on. So we're going to hear it with the Tyler's mid boost off. So it's just going to be the raw bridge humbucker on here, which I really like. I've got the mid boost preamp control cranked all the way up though. So when I kick it in, it's essentially going to be like adding a boost pedal to the front of the X88 IR. We'll hear it with just a little bit of EQ and reverb from the Axe-Fx, but I'll bring the dual Detune in and then a 2-tap delay. Very, very fun indeed. Let's hear the overdrive mode on the X88 IR with some parallel Lukather style delays. There are dedicated PCM 70 style circular and pan delay settings in the Axe-Fx multi-tap delay block. This is pretty gorgeous. that switch is pretty wild on the overdrive mode as well. While we're still here, let's hear a little bit of Dimension chorus, the 2290 delay, and again, some Detune. I am using the large chamber reverb on here this time. I'll disengage the preamp on the guitar. Now, I'm fairly confident that I could get all of those sounds out of the Axe-Fx 3 on its own because the amp modeling in it is pretty phenomenal. One consideration I had, though, was if you were playing out this thought experiment of building a session rig for an era where you need to work really fast, having all the controls of the X88 IR laid out in front of you, all the different mode switches, all the tonal options, having the preamp on the Tyler on top of all of that, would make working in a situation where you've got to build tones from scratch on the hardware slightly faster. And also, I think psychologically, as someone who's grown up playing amps and preamps, using an amp just makes you commit to a sound a little bit faster. And that kind of scenario, if you hear stories from all those top session players, whether it's Lukather, Huff, Landau, Tim Pierce, they all talk about their ability to work really fast and to commit to tones. I think probably the best story I've heard is Lukather working with Lionel Richie, where he basically set up his rig, played through the song as he listened to it for the first time, and they were all like, cool, that's it, that's the solo, and it's one of the most iconic solos of the 80s. If you can name that solo, let me know in the comments section below. If you can name that solo, go and listen to it and tell everybody about it as well. But for now, I'm gonna put some pitch crystals on, a whole bunch of different delays, all the big ambient stuff that makes playing clean guitar so much fun. And I'll just say thanks for watching the video. Again, if you want the effects, they're in my Fractal Blocks library. You can check out in-depth videos with all this gear, but this was just a fun little thought experiment and an excuse to indulge in some gorgeous 80s inspired tones. Go and play your guitars. I will see you all on the next one.